Well, good afternoon, Alex. Thank you so much for joining our podcast this afternoon. Afternoon your time, of course, morning my time.
Good
Um,
morning.
I I have I as I started my conversation with you a few minutes ago, last weekend I thought I had a busy weekend. And then I visited your Facebook page and noticed that you drove thousands of kilometers to take supplies into Ukraine. So I am and it's kind of an ongoing thing that you do. And so I am so excited to get to hear from you and some of the stories and some of the things that you're seeing as you're journeying across the border. But before we dive into any of that, Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What church are you part of? And tell us a little bit about your family.
Thank you for having me, Sean. And yeah, you get tired, but then you do have the chance of resting a bit, and then you take it all over again. And but we do try to rest. I My name is Alex. I am from Romania, the north part of Romania. I was born in Sighetu Marmației, which is at the border with Ukraine. Then spent my college years in Bucharest, and then as a assistant pastor and youth pastor in two churches in Bucharest, and then after having our first child and deciding to have more, we decided to come back to Maramuresh, the county we're in Baia Mare. It's like 50 kilometers from where I was born, still close to Ukraine. And it's been 4 years almost since we moved back. I have Madalena, my wife, and I have three kids: Caleb, Elia, and Colin, Noah Colin.
So you have your hands full, basically. You've got
I have I
a little.
have an amazing wife. So if I was tired from driving and from loading and unloading and taking stuff to Ukraine, my wife actually does the hardest work in staying with the kids. And I tell you what, it's not easy with our kids. So when people hear this or watch this, I'm not the one doing the hard work. My wife is.
Got it. Well, we'll make sure we leave that part in on the interview.
Leave that
It's
part
all
in
about
because
your wife,
it's
and
it's one
it's just how the
it's
world goes. Whether
100%.
you're
It's true, man. I tell you.
United States, Romania, it's all about the wives.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, well, well, I mean, obviously, Alex, we have seen really a tragedy unfold um, in Ukraine since the 24th of February. And
Yes.
I know a lot of the folks who watch the podcast or listen to the podcast um, have heard me talk to pastors. We've talked to some refugees. We've talked to a number of different people. And there's a lot of commonalities I have a feeling we're going to see as you're sharing,
Yeah.
just of the church uniting together to serve and help. Um, but there's also a lot of heartbreak, and there's a lot of there's been a lot of challenging times, and so uh, tell me a little bit about what's been driving you. I mean, obviously, as a fellow believer, as a brother in the Lord, we feel, if you're like me, you feel compelled. It's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, is because
Yeah.
I feel compelled to continue to share the stories of what God is doing and how He's using this tragedy to spread his gospel message and impact the lives of others. But what drives you? What's been driving you to continue going back and forth across the border so many times?
So it all started in the 24th of February when that night, tell you the truth, I was working on a video project because I work in video editing as well. And I was reading some news about the possibility of a war in Ukraine right that day. We knew there were tensions. Everybody was talking about it, especially the U.S. was telling Ukraine they're gonna invade. And um, it was like 4 in the morning when I was seeing some news about it. And then it was official. Russia had a special operation in Ukraine,
Hmm.
and I opened the TV to watch the news. They were showing the some of the bombardments in Kiev, and talking about the what they knew right then, because they didn't have all the information. Seeing the news, and then my kids came down. They woke up and they came down, and they were asking. So my son is five. It's only five. He's 5 year old. My daughter is 3 year old, and then we have a 9 month. But he was asking, so Daddy, what's going on? And we kind of explained to him, in his words, that there's a war, and there's people being attacked, and they have to run, because you could see like the cars piling up in Kiev, just trying to get out of Kiev. And we were trying to explain to him what's going on, and then at one point, after a few minutes, the alarm sounded at the TV, and he heard it, and he was a bit scared. So we had
Hmm.
to shut the TV down, and try to protect him from the news and from what was going on, because he is young, and he doesn't understand everything.
Yeah, Alex, you said something there that I want to highlight a little bit because as I think about, here I sit in Dallas, Texas, and there's a couple things you said. Number one, I couldn't imagine explaining to my daughter war. Um, it, and she's older, and just the idea of you having to have that kind of a conversation with a 5-year old is is definitely challenging as a parent. I mean, that's not something you just bring up at the dinner table. um
No, no.
and it also reminds me, so many of the images that have come across, and I will ask you some stories here in a couple minutes, but so many of the images that we've seen, um I see the faces of these children who have come across, and especially during the early days, the
Yes.
kind of the early
Yeah.
part of March, and when everything was really just kind of chaotic. Um, just to see the shell shocked look on their face, uh, not understanding, not knowing what was going on.
Mm.
There was a picture that we had of a little boy. He's probably 9 or 10, and he was just sitting on a suitcase, which is all he had left. Of course, that's all they had time to grab. They were at one of our medical clinics, and he was just holding his puppy. And that was it. And that image is now seared into my mind because I just cannot imagine what that poor child is thinking, and what he's going to have the healing. And thank
The
God we serve a
traumas.
powerful God, right? Thank God we serve a God who can restore, who can heal, and but the healing that he's going to have to go through based on what he saw. We heard stories of course, what things people saw in the streets as they were heading
Yes.
out of town. um so those things stand out to me tremendously. And tell me a little bit about, so when did you guys see the border start to kind of fill up, and maybe connect that over to when did you make your first trek back into Ukraine? Because I'm sure there was a time when everyone was coming this way, so trying to go that way would be
Yeah.
a bit of a challenge, kind of swimming
It was.
upstream.
It was. But tell you what, first time I went to Ukraine was, I think, just a week after. But the first time I went to the border was the same day. But then, helping out, because it was February.
Hmm.
One of the first thing I did was get blankets. We
Right.
got tens of blankets just to share it with the people crossing who would not have proper clothes. So that was the first thing we could do. And actually, I was at the border with Caleb, my 5 year old, in 4 days, because My wife, she loves working with kids. She's a teacher, and she realizes the traumas that kids are going through. So what she did like some kits of, crayons and some toys, some small toys, and some paper to write on, and a really 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 practical kit that we could share with the kids crossing the border. And the person who handed out the kits was Caleb, because he was a
Wow.
child, and he actually wanted to. He was really excited. So me and Caleb, we went by car to Seagate, and we took, like, I think first time we had like 40 kids for kids crossing the border, and he would just go to the kids and give it to them. They obviously didn't have time to take anything like that, and
Right.
even though you would think it now is not the time to use crayons or play with a toy, but actually it was for them. It kind of got them out of that, running from home, not being able to take any toys, not having what to do, because the parents were stressed with what I'm going to do next, especially in the first days. Some of them never went out of Ukraine. um, they were scared. They did not knew the language, and they did not know that Romanians are willing to help. They did not know what to expect from Romanians when they crossed the border,
Hmm.
because there were some tensions in the past. If
Right.
you know the history of Ukraine and Romania, especially at the border cities, uh, basically South Ukraine, North Romania was Romania before. So they didn't knew exactly. I even had a history major telling me that she's shocked because she knows history, and she did not expect Romanians to be so warm and helping and willing to, do. I'm not talking about me, but even on the road to our place, because we hosted them, they were helped by the police, and they were helped by others, and she was just shocked of, seeing this from Romanian people. To come back to your question, after 1 week, I went with a family that had to get some stuff from Ukraine. So I went over and helped them with the bag, with some of the bags and some of the stuff that they had to bring back into to Romania. But it was not on a war zone. It was not, it was Ukraine. We did not knew what to expect in the first days.
Right.
Nobody expected Russia to attack Kiev, but they did anyways. Everybody was expecting what's happening now to try to conquer the east part of Ukraine. But what happened was they attacked everywhere in Lviv, in Kiev, and I think that's why a lot of people started to run from Ukraine, because they saw it was serious. They're not just wanted to take the east; they wanted to take the whole country.
Right. Yeah. History. It's interesting. One of the things that a pastor was telling me was, because I asked the question about Romania and Ukraine, and obviously knowing there's been some some tensions there in the past,
In the
and
past.
this is the pastor said, older gentleman. He said, I've heard these stories from my family about World War II. And he said, I never thought I would see anything even close to that. And I'm not saying that what's happening now is at the level of World War II, but he said,
No, it's
you
not, but
know,
still.
I never thought that two civilized countries like Russia and Ukraine would go to war and we would have this kind of upheaval in Eastern Europe. And he said, that's what compelled our church and to get involved, is because we remember how people helped us. We heard the stories about how people helped us, and so we just, well, of course we're going to help. Of course we're going to help. People
Yeah.
need help. So,
And
um,
it's not even, yeah, being a Christian, you have a bigger motivation of loving your neighbor, and loving God through loving your neighbor. But even people who maybe don't believe in God, or who don't have like a Christian motivation to what they did, they started to get involved and to help out because it's just you know it's the right thing to do.
Right.
It's not just the Christian thing to do. It's the right thing to do to help out as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think being a follower of Christ just amplifies that,
Yes.
and it gives, I think, an opportunity for us to share our faith because it makes people begin to ask those questions. Why
Yeah.
are you helping me? I mean, why are you treating me so kindly? Why are you giving me your best? Um, why did you open your home to me? Why am I sitting at your family table? And it starts to ask, people start to ask those questions, and then that opens that door for that ministry to take place. And so I think that there's a for as tragic as the events are, there's a beautiful allegory happening right now with what Christ intended the church to be, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to be
That's why I
the
said we pray to have an impact as a church. We pray to make a difference, but uh, now we have the chance to do it.
right.
Now we have the opportunity, and we have to take it.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that some of the stories. I know that as I started the conversation, you just returned literally a couple of days ago or a day and a half ago from
Yesterday.
yesterday from a
Yes.
from a fairly. All I know is I saw like I said earlier, I saw the gentleman. I think your
My
friend
friend. Yes.
sleeping in the back of a van. And I saw
I,
some very good looking pizza. I saw some very good looking pizza
oh,
on a table, and I thought, man. That's
I
that's
tell
a,
you
that's a
what.
reward well earned right there.
Tell
So,
you what. The pizza you eat in Ukraine is better than the one you can get in Romania. And
oh,
I've tried it
interesting.
in some of the cities, and it's really really good. But this is a whole nother conversation. But the pizza
we'll
is
talk
really.
pizza on the
We'll talk.
next podcast. But
Yeah.
so tell me what are some of the stories? What are some of the things that you're seeing as you're heading over there? Obviously, first of all, and I'm just going to ask like a couple questions here, then I'll let you just answer
All
them
right.
as it flows. But um, how are you gathering these supplies? Because you're taking a lot of supplies over. I mean, I saw the vans, I saw the
Yeah.
the photos of you guys unloading, the video clips of you guys unloading the sprinters, or what we would call sprinter vans here.
Yeah.
Um, where are you getting those supplies? Where are you taking those supplies? And obviously, using discretion of where you're going exactly. You feel
Yeah.
free to share what you need, what you feel you can share. And what is the reaction? What are some of the stories you're seeing?
So the first couple of weeks when we were talking about taking supplies into Ukraine, we just collected money from friends and money from church, and we would just get some of the stuff and take it across the border because men who can drive and have sprinter vans, they could not cross to Romania to
Right.
so now some of them can if they're doing humanitarian work and they have the paperwork for it. Now some of them can do that, but the first couple of weeks they could not do that. So it was really important for us to take the food there at the border and then unload it from our sprinter vans in their sprinter vans. Took I think it was a big truck and then a van. We took it to the border and we went to Chernivtsi, to Chernouts, um, to Nova Poshta, which is like FedEx for in Ukraine, and we delivered it because they had the network, they had everything arranged. We delivered it to where it had to go, and then it was distributed to the people in Dnipro and Zaporizhia region and cities near the front line.
Right. So you
So
would get it to
it
the hubs, and then they would use their network to
yes,
distribute it, basically.
yes,
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I know when we were talking before we got started with the actual podcast, you were mentioning, and this is really important for listeners to understand. Even though the flow of refugees has slowed down, praise God, it's slowed down a little bit, and there are
yeah,
now some safer areas of Ukraine to be in. As you
yes,
travel east, closer towards Russia, the
it gets something.
devastation is amplified. It is you tell me what you told me earlier about what's happening there in the east.
So they obviously realize they cannot conquer Kiev, and they cannot, take Ukraine. So at this point, from what the pastors told me, who are in connection with the army, because they're cooking for them and they're helping out, sending aid to the front line, every time they have the opportunity, is that the Russians don't care anymore about the cities or the people. They never cared before, but they were a bit cautious. But now they don't even care. They just want like a way towards Crimea. That's kind of everything they need now. So they're destroy. They don't care what they destroy. They just um, and it's dangerous because they do have good weapons, and they just they bomb, and they use their artillery, and they do a lot of damage compared to
Right.
what they did before when they tried to conquer Kiev. That's why I say in East it's worse now, because at this point they're pretty desperate, and they don't care about anything anymore. So it's just,
Right.
that's the information I do have from people in Ukraine who know a bit about what's going on.
Yesterday it looked like, and correct me, I'm going off the photos that I saw on your Facebook. And if you're listening to the podcast right now, you are not following Alex on Facebook, you need to go follow him because he's posting a ton of content up, um, really from the front lines and showing his journeys in and out of country. He has some phenomenal videos up there. And so I would encourage you, go follow him. Hope you don't mind me giving your Facebook a plug, Alex,
No, no,
uh,
it's not a problem. No,
because I was learning so
but I do
much just
have to
looking.
correct you with something. It's not frontline. I mean, it would not be correct of me to give the impression that it's frontline. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, we've seen a lot, but when frontline is a few hundred kilometers more east and south of where we go, but it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, you were just telling me about a story where you had missiles flying over your head.
Yeah.
So
First time
uh,
first time we went in central Ukraine. I obviously had to give assurances to my family. It's safe, and I had to give assurances to the people coming with me. So I told them, guys, there's no Russian troops on the ground. The only chance of being put in danger is if missiles fly by. So I was, I'm 100% confident that it's safe. And I talked to the pastor there and the people there. They told me it's safe. We had no incidents here. It's a safe place to bring the stuff. And then we obviously share it with the refugees in our area, and we take it further to the front line, because it's our responsibility to take it there. It's not yours. After unloading all the stuff, the pastor and the Natalia, who's the manager of the church, they drove me and the other two guys that were with me. They drove us around town, showed us, the Dnipro River, which is beautiful. You can uh, go to the beach there. It's really wide there. It's like going to the sea, and seeing some of the buildings and the old city and the new part of the city. It was just beautiful. And every time we go there, we put the good part as well, because we don't want to send just the message of, oh, there's only destruction, there's only suffering, there's only poverty, because
right,
it's
sure,
not only suffering, poverty, and destructions. There are good parts. Restaurants are opened again. And you can go to a restaurant, you can go to a mall, you can. There's a different kind of normality there. um, they're getting adjusted to,
right,
which nobody would want, but it's just the normality. You go into a mall, and the entrance of the mall, you have like sand bags, just piled up in case something happens. And it's
right,
just interesting to see that the windows are covered with wood, for not to be breaked. and that's one of the normalities of going to a shopping mall now, seeing all that, and obviously having block posts everywhere and soldiers and checkpoints and everything. That's the new normality. But they showed us the city. It was beautiful. And when we got back to the church, we heard like a airplane sound, but we were close to the airport, so it's not normal to hear airplanes unless they're like army airplanes, because there's no commercial
Right, right.
lines traveling now. But and then we just I would say, because I fly drones, it was like 30 meters more to the right, just above us, a missile just went by. And 2 seconds after, we saw like the shield just taking it down, somewhere in the back of the church. Uh, so we were shocked. We were like, okay, what now? What are
Right,
they gonna
right.
be more, or it's gonna be worse than just one? Uh, Natalia was, she was like, I think she was more, I don't know, embarrassed because they told us that it's safe, and we just saw missiles flying by. uh, and then we went. I went in the back of the church to see what's going on, and I heard the second explosion, which I got on tape, on the camera, which I didn't show exactly immediately after, because you're not allowed to uh,
Right.
share anything. But I did get that on camera, and you could hear an explosion. But from what I heard, it was taken down as well. So they did not hit any of you know. I think they were aiming towards the bridge, because they're trying to destroy the infrastructure and the path towards the east to take the supplies for the soldiers and the arms for the soldiers.
Right.
And the other one was towards the airport, the one that we saw, probably to the air base. We don't want to do like a we don't want to be over dramatic with this story,
Sure.
uh, because it's they're going through the tragedies. We just had a glimpse of what it means and how dangerous it could be, just out of the sudden, from a city that was safe, just having, being a city that, okay, even here they can just bomb us. And
Within seconds, it could change. You just never.
yes,
So what you're saying is, you have to be vigilant, but at the same time,
yes.
obviously, you have to get the job done. Someone's,
Yeah.
we've
So
got to
we
get
after
people.
seeing that, obviously, Madalena was like, "Come home." It's like, we have to take the stuff that were brought tomorrow to some of the nonprofits and the army and everything. So we stayed for one more day, and nothing happened the next day. That was our experience with our first trip to Central Ukraine.
Well, we will. You will be in our prayers for sure that you don't see any more fireworks
No,
in the
it
sky.
was enough. It was
Yeah,
enough.
you saw it. Good. Check that
We
off the
saw it.
list.
It's good.
That's
Now, if we don't, it's okay with me.
even better. So, what can we do? What are the needs? Um, because something you said earlier. You said the pastor says we don't really need money at the moment, but your presence being here, still a lot of those tangible goods are very helpful for a lot of areas that may not have us, whose supply chain has been cut off, or they're not able to get the basics for life.
Big
What are
cities are pretty okay, from what I know, and we've been to shopping malls and places where you can buy stuff.
okay,
The places that are affected are the smaller towns and the villages.
got it.
And what happened in the big cities was, people who had money, put saved, and were living in east of Ukraine. They went to the big cities, and they obviously they afforded renting apartments there, and getting a place where to stay in the cities, and maybe even getting jobs there. That's one of the issues. They have cars, they had houses, some of them, or they still have houses because they were not yet destroyed, but there's the possibility of having their houses destroyed. But they don't have jobs. They
Right.
don't have a monthly income,
Right. Right.
which brings them, gives them like the safety of, we can buy that and we can buy that. So the problem is not we cannot find food. The problem is we cannot buy it because we don't have jobs, and we don't know how to buy it. So a lot of them, they depend on churches who help out, or nonprofits who help out and give out food and aid for them.
So, from what I'm hearing, one of the ways that churches here in the United States can continue to stay involved is by helping, obviously, those organizations, those nonprofits that are valid, that are
Yes.
verified, that are actually there,
Yes.
by helping them so that they can continue to distribute. Because if Romania, Ukraine, or anything like the United States right now, we've got fuel prices going out of
Yes.
control.
Yeah.
We to fill a vehicle now is double what it was, a
And you can
year
only,
ago.
in Ukraine, one of the issues, you can only fill up 20 liters. That's a day. So it's a problem with them coming to the border now, because they don't have the fuel. They cannot get the fuel. It's hard. They can, if they wait for a few days and get 20 liters, and they save up, and then they can come to the border. When we go there, I take like 200, 250 liters of diesel with me, so I can make it there and back home. So that's one of the needs in our case, to have fuel with us, so we don't have to stay in the queues, which are long. We're talking about hundreds of cars, waiting in line just to get 20 liters. We did at 4 a.m. We did get 20 liters from a gas station, but that's all that they gave us, because they
Right.
said diesel is for the army and the police, and it's reserved for them. But because you're humanitarian, and we had to prove that, we have to give them our passports and our documents of, that we were taking aid to Ukraine. We had to show everything. They had to take pictures and send them to, their network. And then after like 10, 15 minutes, they give us the okay of putting in 20 liters on each car we had. So
Wow.
it's really difficult in Ukraine right now. Not only the prices when doubled in their case, and even in Romania, but they cannot get as much as they need to do, a lot of ministry. So
Right.
they save up. So the only ones who do have are lucky are those who have like LPG cars, because it's easier to find LPG. But our trucks are diesel, so it's
Right.
really difficult to get diesel in Ukraine right now. But yes, helping out churches that can help refugees in Ukraine. And I was telling you about the cities, but the worst part is, and we went this time when we went to Cherkasy, central Ukraine, we went in some of the villages near Cherkasy, which I told you is like a 300, 400 now with the refugees, 1,000 people living in. But even the villages around Cherkasy are full with refugees who did not have the money to get an apartment in the city. So they were given by the state houses that are, nobody lives in them, or, they're abandoned. So they give them the houses to stay in. But because you were talking about villages, they don't have work.
Right.
Some of the people in the city don't have work, but we're in the villages, there's no work there. You cannot find work. So they need the help of, nonprofits and churches that are willing to go there and help them out. So this is what we did in our last trip there. We went in 4 or 5 villages, and we just gave them like 2 big bags of food, canned food, and oil and flour, and to, have for the next weeks. I would say somewhere around a week or two.
Right. Just to help
So
kind of tide them over for a little while so they're not having to worry about
yes, yes,
that.
and
Yeah.
if they go to every nonprofit that they could go to but there is like a registration form that you have to fill up, to receive. You cannot receive uh, I think only 2 weeks or 3 weeks till you can get the another help. Because there are a lot of people, and they want to make sure they're helping out everyone and not just a few of them.
Right,
So
who are trying to
it's difficult for some,
right.
and for others, it's more than difficult. When As you go towards East Ukraine, it's more and more difficult because, as you said, the supply chain is not good. It's good in some of the big cities, but when you go towards East, it's just bad.
Gets worse as you go east, yeah.
Yes.
Well, Alex, I know, and I want to speak just really for a second here before we wrap up to the listeners out there. Um, as I've said on several of these podcasts, obviously prayers are needed for not just the refugees, not just for those who have been displaced or who are traveling abroad trying to find their next destination, but for people like Alex and his team who are, uh, you know, putting themselves at risk, not just from necessarily war, but just from fatigue and from exhaustion. And it's hard to say no. It's hard to say no when you're in the middle of helping and doing good. And it's hard to remember yourself and taking that break. So be praying for Alex and his team
Thank
as
you.
that when they do have time to rest, that they really get some good restful sleep. And um, and as I've always said in these podcasts, it doesn't matter what you can give. If it's $5, if it's $500, if it's $5,000, whatever role you can play,
Or even
find
come
these
here.
organizations. The need is there, and as we've continued to talk about, there's going to be a rebuilding process too, sooner or later. That we hope it's sooner than later, but there will be a
Obviously.
time when people will be going back. And as Alex has just pointed out, jobs are an issue. There's not a lot of jobs. People's homes that they once depended
People's
upon, that was
homes.
their investment, may,
Yes.
may or may not be there anymore. Um,
No.
so there's going to be a rebuilding process. It's going to take time. And during that time, resources will be needed. So I want to encourage you, if you're listening, to take action. Alex, do you have a website that people can go to that you recommend that they can go to make a donation if they are able to?
So we did not have time to put up a website for Make a Difference, but they either can send money to our church or our foundation. Make a Difference is just the project name, but Charity Foundation is the name of the foundation where we have a bank account and everything is transparent. We had Samaritan Purse sending in money. We had some churches from US sending money.
Well, Alex, I salute you, and I thank you so much for your diligence and your listening to God and the ministry that's taking place, and talking about, as we said earlier, being the hands and feet of Jesus. And so I will you will definitely be in our prayers, and I
Thank
look
you.
forward to
Thank
continuing
you.
to follow you on your Facebook page and seeing these stories. And perhaps next time we talk, we'll talk pizza.
Oh man, I tell you, but not only pizza. Not only pizza. Their food, their cuisine is really, really good.
Sean here. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like, a follow, and a share. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, consider giving it 5 stars. I look forward to sharing the next story with you real soon.